The lights dim, silence, and then, like thunder cracking across the sky, the roar of a V12 fills the air. The camera cuts to carbon fiber shimmering in the half-light, curves that look less like a car and more like sculpture carved by the gods of speed themselves. This isn't Ferrari. This isn't Lamborghini. This is something different, something rarer, something almost impossible. Because what you're looking at isn't just a machine. It's a dream made real. The dream of a boy born in a small town in Argentina, who grew up not with riches or influence, but with a sketchbook, a passion, and a stubborn belief that art and science could be fused into one. That boy's name was Horacio Pagani. And against every odds stacked against him, poverty, rejection, and the dominance of Italy's greatest automotive giants, he would go on to create one of the most exclusive, breathtaking, and groundbreaking hypercar companies in the world, Pagani Automobili. Pagani's story is unlike any other in the history of the automobile. Where Enzo Ferrari built his legend on racing and Ferruccio Lamborghini on rivalry, Pagani built his company on craftsmanship, vision, and obsession with detail. To him, a car wasn't just a machine to move you from point A to point B. It was a piece of art, living, breathing, resonating with the soul of its creator. And that vision gave birth to legends. The Zonda, unveiled in 1999, a car so audacious in design and so masterful in execution that the automotive world had no choice but to stop and stare. A car made of lightweight carbon fiber when others still hesitated to experiment. A car powered by a thunderous Mercedes-AMG V12, but elevated into something entirely new, equal parts beauty and brutality. Then came the Huayra, a machine named after the god of wind, sculpted to dance with aerodynamics, armed with active flaps that shifted like feathers mid-flight. It was not just engineering, it was poetry. It was Da Vinci's philosophy. Art and science must walk hand in hand, brought to life on four wheels. But what makes the Pagani story so compelling isn't just the cars themselves. It is the man behind them. A man who left his homeland with little money in his pocket, arriving in Italy with nothing but ambition. A man who was rejected by Ferrari, only to later rival Ferrari's dominance in the realm of exotic supercars. A man who, in an age of mass production, chose instead to build fewer than 50 cars a year, each one tailored, each one unique, each one a masterpiece. Pagani isn't about numbers. It isn't about speed records or market shares. It's about passion, about artistry, about a relentless pursuit of perfection that borders on madness. Each bolt, each stitch of leather, each curve of carbon fiber, it's all treated with the reverence of a painter holding his brush or a sculptor chiseling marble. And yet, the journey was anything but easy. Pagani faced financial struggles, skepticism, rejection, and the towering shadows of giants like Ferrari and Lamborghini. But where others would have given up, he pressed forward, guided by the same vision that had inspired him as a boy sketching in the Argentine countryside. This is not just the story of a car company. It is the story of a dreamer who refused to compromise, who refused to follow the rules, and who created rolling pieces of art that the world will never forget. This is the story of Pagani. On November 10, 1955, in the small agricultural town of Casilda, Argentina, a boy was born into a world far removed from the glamour of European racetracks or the roaring engines of Italy's supercar factories. His name was Horacio Pagani. The son of a humble baker and an Italian immigrant mother, Horacio's beginnings were anything but extraordinary. His father kneaded bread at dawn, while his mother managed the family's modest home. By all appearances, his future was destined to follow a similar quiet path. Yet even in those earliest years, Horacio revealed a restlessness, an insatiable hunger not just to live, but to create. From a young age, Pagani became fascinated with two things: machines and art. He would spend hours sketching shapes that looked futuristic, machines that seemed alive. Unlike other boys in Casilda, whose interests drifted toward soccer or farm life, Horacio lived in the world of imagination. But his fascination was not without influence. His guiding light was none other than Leonardo da Vinci, whose writings he discovered at a young age. Da Vinci's belief that art and science are disciplines that must walk together hand in hand would become the foundation of Pagani's philosophy, and decades later, the soul of his cars. It wasn't just books that inspired him. Argentina in the mid-20th century was far from the epicenter of automotive innovation, but cars still stirred excitement across its dusty roads. Horacio, as a teenager, became fascinated with motorcycles and race cars, often disassembling whatever machines he could get his hands on. While other boys tinkered casually, Pagani treated every nut and bolt as a lesson. Each spark plug, each wheel bearing, each carburetor was another step toward a destiny he couldn't yet name. At just 15 years old, Horacio attempted his first real creation, a homemade go-kart fashioned out of scrap metal and ingenuity. It was crude, yet functional, and more importantly, it was his. Soon after, he built a small motorcycle, again from spare parts and scraps he scavenged. These were not polished machines, but they were proof of something important. Horacio had not only the imagination to dream, but also the skill and determination to bring those dreams into reality. Despite his talent, the environment around him offered little encouragement. Casilda was not Modena or Maranello. It was a small town with no Ferrari factory down the street, no Lamborghini Countach roaring past. His dreams seemed impossibly far away. Still, Pagani's conviction only grew stronger. He often spoke of how he felt trapped in Argentina, knowing that if he wanted to achieve greatness, he would need to go where the masters were. He needed to go to Italy, the land of Ferrari, Maserati, and Lamborghini. But before he could leave, he would make one more mark in Argentina. In his early 20s, Pagani designed and built a Formula 2-style race car almost entirely by himself. The car, primitive compared to European standards, nonetheless showcased an advanced understanding of lightweight design and aerodynamics. Local motorsport circles began to take notice of this young man with an unusual obsession for perfection. His car even competed in small regional events, proving that his work wasn't just artistic, it was functional. Yet Pagani knew this was only a small step. His ambitions stretched far beyond local acclaim. In 1974, Horacio enrolled in the National University of La Plata, studying industrial design and engineering. While his formal education gave him structure, Pagani remained largely self-taught. He consumed books, practiced relentlessly, and sought to combine his engineering knowledge with artistry. During this time, he refined his philosophy. A car should not simply be fast, it should be beautiful, not simply efficient, but emotionally stirring. He often referred back to Da Vinci's lessons, internalizing the idea that beauty and function are inseparable. But Argentina in the 1970s was plagued by economic instability and political unrest. Opportunities for an ambitious young engineer were limited, and access to advanced materials like carbon fiber was non-existent. The reality was clear. If Horacio stayed, his dream would wither. And so, in the late 1970s, he made the most daring decision of his life. He left Argentina behind, carrying little more than his passion, his drawings, and his unshakable belief that destiny awaited him in Italy. Arriving in Italy was anything but glamorous. Pagani was not greeted as a prodigy. He had no money, no connections, and no guarantees. He worked humble jobs at small workshops, often sleeping in cramped conditions, barely making enough to survive. Yet he remained undeterred. Each day was spent learning, watching, absorbing everything about the Italian automotive world. To him, even sweeping the floors of a workshop meant being closer to the world he had dreamt of as a boy. Pagani applied to Ferrari, his childhood idol, hoping to secure a position at the most iconic automotive brand in the world. But Ferrari rejected him. To them, he was just another ambitious outsider, without pedigree or connections. For many, this would have been the end of the road. But for Pagani, it only fueled his determination. If Ferrari would not open its doors, he would find another path. That path would soon take him to Lamborghini, where fate would give him the opportunity to prove himself. But before that chapter begins, it is essential to understand the young Horacio Pagani. A boy who once sketched machines under the Argentinian sun, a dreamer who idolized Leonardo da Vinci, and a man willing to leave everything behind to chase a vision that seemed impossible. His story is not one of privilege or luck. It is one of relentless drive, of believing that the marriage of art and engineering could create something the world had never seen before. That belief would one day lead to the creation of machines like the Zonda and Huayra, cars not just admired for their speed, but revered as works of art. But those masterpieces were still far in the future. First, Horacio Pagani would have to fight through rejection, setbacks, and years of struggle before he could even begin to build his dream. This is where the real story begins. Every great inventor begins with failure. For Horacio Pagani, those failures came early, and they came often. But unlike most, he did not fear them. He studied them, learned from them, and turned them into stepping stones toward greatness. Back in Casilda, Argentina, long before the Pagani Zonda was even a sketch in his notebook, Horacio was a young man chasing the mysteries of engineering with nothing more than determination and scraps of material. The town was small, the resources limited, but his imagination knew no bounds. He would scour junkyards and mechanical workshops for discarded parts, metal tubes, worn-out wheels, broken engines, and take them back to his makeshift workshop. His first major attempt at engineering independence was the homemade go-kart. It was primitive, built mostly from salvaged bicycle parts, a small engine, and an improvised frame. But to Horacio, it was a marvel. He had created something that could move under its own power. Yet, as soon as he pushed it to its limits, the flaws revealed themselves. The welds cracked, the steering wobbled, the engine overheated. Neighbors laughed, calling it a toy, something that could barely stay on the road. But Horacio didn't see embarrassment. He saw opportunity. Each weakness was a problem to solve, each failure another lesson. He kept refining, learning how to strengthen frames, balance weight, and coax more performance out of crude engines. Soon after, he turned his attention to motorcycles. Again, his creations were far from perfect. Engines misfired, fuel systems leaked, and he often found himself stranded on dusty rural roads after breakdowns. But he always returned to his workshop, notebook in hand, writing down what had gone wrong and how he could fix it. These early experiments taught him a truth that would define his career. Perfection is not achieved in a single stroke. It is built through countless revisions, failures, and improvements. By the late 1960s, Pagani was no longer content with small machines. Inspired by the racing world, particularly Formula One and endurance racing he read about in magazines, he set his sights on building a race car. At just 20 years old, he began work on a Formula 2-style single-seater, something far beyond his modest means. Using tubular steel, a simple body shell, and an engine sourced from local suppliers, he built what was, by Argentinian standards, an extraordinary car. Crude in many respects, yes, but ambitious beyond belief. The car ran, it moved, and in small regional competitions it even managed to impress. But compared to the advanced machines of Europe, it was outdated the moment it was finished. Horacio knew it. He didn't need anyone to tell him that his car would never rival Ferrari or Lotus, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he had built it with his own hands, and in doing so, he had proven to himself that he could create something bigger than a backyard project. It was a failure on the racetrack, but a success in his personal journey. These projects, however, came at a cost. Money was scarce. Argentina was going through political unrest and economic difficulties, and young Pagani often struggled to find enough resources to keep his work going. His family, though supportive in spirit, could not provide much financial help. Many around him suggested abandoning these foolish ambitions, urging him to find stable work. But Horacio refused to let go. He believed his future was not in Casilda. It was in Europe, in Italy, where Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Maserati shaped the future of cars. The failures he experienced at home pushed him toward a decision that would change his life forever: to leave Argentina. But the road to Italy was not immediate. Before he could go, he needed to prepare himself. He enrolled in industrial design and engineering studies at the National University of La Plata. Formal education was important, but Horacio treated it as a supplement rather than a foundation. Most of his true learning still came in the workshop, where trial and error continued to shape his hands and mind. During this time, Pagani developed a fascination with materials. He understood that the future of cars wasn't just about engines or aerodynamics. It was about what they were made of. Lightweight materials like aluminum and composites fascinated him, though access in Argentina was virtually impossible. He read about Formula One teams experimenting with new materials, and he knew that this was where he needed to focus his knowledge. It was another reminder: Argentina could only take him so far. Finally, with barely any money and no promises waiting on the other side, Horacio set his sights on Italy in the late 1970s. It was a bold, even reckless move. He left behind his family, friends, and the little recognition he had built in Argentina. He arrived in Italy with nothing but a suitcase, a handful of drawings, and an unshakable belief in his dream. Italy, however, greeted him not as a genius, but as a stranger. He was just another immigrant with broken Italian and big dreams. He found work in small workshops, taking on whatever jobs he could, repairing cars, making molds, building simple parts. It was far from glamorous and often humiliating, considering the visions he held in his head. Yet, Horacio never wavered. He treated each small job as an opportunity to learn how Italian craftsmen shaped body panels, how they tuned engines, how they balanced style and performance. Still, he faced rejection. The most painful came from Ferrari, his childhood idol. He sent them letters, sketches, pleas for a chance to prove himself. Ferrari responded with silence. To them, he was unremarkable, one of many outsiders with unrealistic ambitions. Yet fate had a different plan. While Ferrari shut its doors, another Italian giant would soon open theirs: Lamborghini. And it was at Lamborghini that Horacio Pagani's obsession with advanced materials, particularly carbon fiber, would take root, setting the stage for everything he would one day create under his own name. The boy who had once cobbled together go-karts from scrap metal was now standing at the threshold of Italy's supercar world. His failures had forged him, and his relentless pursuit of perfection was about to collide with one of the greatest names in automotive history. When Horacio Pagani first arrived in Italy, he carried little more than ambition. The dream was clear: to reach the heart of the supercar world. Yet in those early years, he found himself sweeping floors in workshops and taking on menial tasks just to stay afloat. But if there was one thing he had learned in Argentina, it was patience. Every small job, every minor task, was a chance to observe, to learn, and to prepare for the opportunity he knew would eventually come. That opportunity arrived in the early 1980s when Pagani managed to secure work at Lamborghini, a company then in a period of uncertainty. The oil crises of the 1970s had destabilized the supercar market, and Lamborghini itself had endured ownership changes and financial struggles. Still, it was one of the crown jewels of Italian automotive passion, and for Horacio, merely walking into its factory in Sant'Agata Bolognese felt like a dream realized. At first, his role was modest. He wasn't handed the keys to grand projects. Instead, he worked on smaller assignments, quietly proving himself through meticulous craftsmanship and his obsession with details others often overlooked. But it wasn't long before Lamborghini began to notice his unique vision and determination. One of his earliest breakthroughs came with the Lamborghini Countach, the iconic wedge-shaped supercar that had captured the imagination of enthusiasts worldwide. While most saw it as a poster-worthy dream machine, Horacio saw something different, a canvas to experiment with advanced materials. By the early 1980s, motorsport had begun flirting with carbon fiber, a material that was both incredibly strong and impossibly light. Formula One, led by McLaren, had already unveiled the first carbon fiber monocoque car in 1981, and Horacio knew this was the future of high-performance automobiles. Yet within Lamborghini, the interest in carbon fiber was lukewarm at best. The material was expensive, difficult to work with, and its long-term durability was still questioned. Many executives dismissed it as unnecessary. Pagani disagreed. For him, carbon fiber wasn't just a novelty, it was a revolution. He argued that the future of supercars depended on shedding weight without sacrificing strength, and carbon composites were the key. His passion and persistence finally led to a groundbreaking internal project, the Lamborghini Countach Evoluzione. The Evoluzione was unlike anything Lamborghini had ever attempted. It was conceived as an experimental prototype, a test bed to explore the possibilities of composite materials. Horacio played a central role in the project, overseeing the extensive use of carbon fiber in its construction. The chassis, body panels, and even interior components were made with composites, reducing weight dramatically compared to the steel and aluminum Countach models of the time. The result was staggering. The Countach Evoluzione weighed over 500 kilograms less than the standard Countach, a figure that redefined the performance potential of the car. Its rigidity was improved, its agility sharpened, and its overall capability pushed into uncharted territory. Though never intended for production, the Evoluzione was a glimpse into the future, a future Pagani could see clearly, even if others could not. Yet for all its brilliance, the project faced resistance. Lamborghini's leadership viewed the Evoluzione as little more than a costly experiment. The costs of carbon fiber production were high, and the supercar market of the 1980s was fragile. Executives balked at the idea of investing heavily in unproven technology. To them, it was safer to stick with tradition, steel, aluminum, and incremental improvements. For Horacio, this was deeply frustrating. He had poured himself into the Evoluzione, believing it could spark a new era for Lamborghini. But when management shelved the project, dismissing it as impractical, Horacio felt the limits of his role at the company. He was a man ahead of his time, confined by the caution of others. Still, the experience had given him something invaluable: proof. Proof that his ideas worked. Proof that carbon fiber was the future. Proof that his vision wasn't fantasy. It was reality waiting to be embraced. And though Lamborghini didn't fully appreciate it, others were beginning to notice. Suppliers, engineers, and industry insiders saw in Pagani a man with extraordinary talent and relentless belief. But talent alone wasn't enough. To push forward with his vision, Horacio needed independence. He needed his own workshop, his own tools, and above all, his own freedom to innovate without compromise. And so, in the mid-1980s, he made another bold decision: to strike out on his own. Leaving Lamborghini was not easy. It meant stepping away from a legendary name, from stability, and from the prestige he had worked so hard to earn. But Pagani was driven not by prestige, but by obsession. The obsession to perfect, to innovate, and to create cars unlike anything the world had seen. In 1991, he founded Modena Design, a small but ambitious engineering firm located near Modena, the beating heart of Italy's automotive valley. Modena Design specialized in advanced composites, offering expertise in carbon fiber to both automotive and non-automotive clients. It was a risky move, but one that aligned perfectly with Pagani's vision. By working with composites across different industries, he could refine techniques, learn new applications, and establish himself as a leader in the field. But this was not yet the company he dreamed of. Modena Design was the foundation, but Pagani Automobili, the hypercar brand bearing his name, was still just a dream in his notebooks. Building a full-fledged car company from scratch would require not just talent, but also partnerships, capital, and a leap into the unknown. Still, Horacio Pagani's years at Lamborghini had armed him with more than skills. They had given him conviction. He had seen what composites could do. He had felt the potential of a lighter, stronger, more advanced supercar. And he knew one day he would build it, not as a Lamborghini, not as a Ferrari, but as something entirely his own. That dream, however, would require one more breakthrough. Finding an engine worthy of his vision and convincing the world to believe in a car built not by a giant company, but by a single man with an idea. The next chapter in his journey would be the most daring yet, the creation of his very first car, the prototype that would evolve into a legend. By the early 1990s, Horacio Pagani had built a reputation in Italy's Automotive Valley as a quiet genius of composite materials. Through his company, Modena Design, he was supplying expertise in carbon fiber to motorsport teams and even aerospace projects. Yet deep inside, Horacio knew this was only preparation. He hadn't left Argentina, endured rejection, and spent years perfecting composites just to be a supplier. His dream was always bigger, to create his own supercar. Not a Lamborghini, not a Ferrari, not a Maserati, but a Pagani. But how does a man with no fortune, no factory, and no brand reputation build a supercar company in the land of giants? The odds were staggering. In the early 90s, Italy was home to titans: Ferrari, steeped in racing heritage; Lamborghini, bold and flamboyant; Maserati, elegant and historic. Horacio Pagani was an outsider. To many, the idea of him creating his own car company was nothing short of impossible. And yet, this is precisely why he did it. The first sketches. The seeds of what would become Pagani Automobili were planted as early as 1988, when Horacio began sketching his vision for a car that combined the artistry of Leonardo da Vinci with the cutting-edge technology of aerospace engineering. To him, a supercar was not merely a machine. It was a rolling sculpture, where every line, every curve, and every material served both beauty and function. He called the project the C8 Project, though privately, he gave it another name, the Fangio Project, in honor of his childhood hero, Juan Manuel Fangio, the legendary Argentine Formula One champion. Pagani admired Fangio not only for his driving skill, but for his character, meticulous, intelligent, and refined. Fangio would become a guiding figure for Pagani, even agreeing to lend his name to the project before his passing in 1995. The engine problem. Pagani knew that the soul of any supercar is its engine. Without the right power plant, even the most beautiful chassis would be meaningless. But as a newcomer, convincing an engine supplier to trust him was almost impossible. Ferrari would never sell engines to an outsider who might one day compete with them. Lamborghini was financially unstable. Maserati was in transition. The breakthrough came when Horacio approached Mercedes-Benz. Specifically, its performance division, AMG, which was gaining recognition for its work on high-performance engines. Mercedes, unlike Ferrari, saw potential in supporting Pagani. Perhaps they recognized his relentless pursuit of perfection, or perhaps they saw an opportunity to showcase their engines in a new exotic platform. Whatever the reason, Mercedes-AMG agreed to supply Horacio with their legendary M120 V12 engine, a 6.0-liter powerhouse capable of immense performance. This was the lifeline Pagani needed. With AMG's V12 as the beating heart of his creation, his vision had a chance to become reality, building Pagani Automobili. In 1992, Horacio Pagani officially founded Pagani Automobili Modena, setting up a small workshop just outside Modena. This was no vast factory with endless resources. It was a modest facility, staffed by a handful of dedicated craftsmen and engineers, each handpicked for their passion and skill. Unlike Ferrari or Lamborghini, where hundreds of workers labored on assembly lines, Pagani Automobili operated like an artisan workshop. Every part was touched by human hands, every detail obsessed over. The philosophy was clear. This was not about mass production. It was about perfection. Pagani envisioned building only a few cars each year, each one bespoke, each one a piece of art that could sit as comfortably in a museum as it could on a racetrack. The prototype. By the mid-1990s, the first prototype began to take shape. Known internally as the C8 project, it was a car unlike anything the world had seen. Its body was sculpted from carbon fiber, not as an experiment, but as the very foundation of its identity. Where Lamborghini had hesitated with the Countach Evoluzione, Pagani fully embraced composites. The chassis, body panels, and even interior components were painstakingly crafted in carbon, giving the car unmatched lightness and strength. The design reflected Horacio's dual devotion to art and science. The lines were dramatic yet purposeful, blending aerodynamic function with sculptural beauty. Every intake, every curve served a purpose, yet the whole composition looked as if it had been drawn by an artist rather than engineered by a computer. Inside, the car was no less remarkable. While most supercars of the 1990s offered Spartan interiors focused solely on performance, Pagani insisted his creation would be both luxurious and artistic. Exposed carbon weave shimmered beneath lacquer, while switches and gauges were crafted like jewelry. This was not just a driver's cockpit, it was a studio, a gallery, a testament to the fusion of engineering and artistry. But even as the prototype impressed those who saw it, the challenges were immense. Funding was always precarious. Suppliers were skeptical of a brand new company. Critics dismissed Horacio as a dreamer chasing an impossible fantasy. There were endless delays, countless nights where the project seemed destined to collapse. Yet through it all, Horacio refused to compromise. If something wasn't perfect, it was redone. If a supplier doubted him, he searched for another. His belief never wavered. The Fangio connection. During these years, Pagani maintained close contact with Juan Manuel Fangio, his childhood idol turned supporter. Fangio offered advice, encouragement, and, most importantly, credibility. Having the name of a five-time Formula One world champion attached to the project gave Pagani a legitimacy he desperately needed. The car was initially intended to debut as the Fangio F1, a tribute to the legend. Sadly, Fangio passed away in 1995 before the car was completed. Out of respect, Horacio renamed the car, giving it a new identity, Zonda, after the powerful winds that sweep across the Andes Mountains of South America. It was a name that carried both poetry and strength, perfectly fitting for his creation. Toward Geneva. By the late 1990s, the prototype was ready for the world stage. Pagani set his sights on the Geneva Motor Show, the most prestigious automotive showcase in the world. Geneva was where legends were born, where supercar enthusiasts, collectors, and journalists gathered to witness the cutting edge of performance. For Horacio, this was the moment of truth. In the winter nights before the show, the workshop in Modena buzzed with frantic energy. Every panel polished, every stitch checked, every detail scrutinized. The car was more than a machine now. It was a dream, 2 decades in the making, about to step into the spotlight. As dawn approached on the eve of the show, Horacio Pagani stood before his creation. Sleek, powerful, unlike anything the automotive world had seen, the Zonda C12 was ready. Whether the world embraced it or dismissed it as folly, one thing was certain. Pagani Automobili was no longer just a dream. It was real. The stage was set for the unveiling that would change everything. The 1999 Geneva Motor Show was unlike anything Horacio Pagani had ever experienced. The convention halls glittered with the brightest stars of the automotive world. Ferrari unveiled machines bred for Formula One glory, Lamborghini's flamboyant designs drew crowds, and Bugatti displayed visions of speed that seemed almost science fiction. In the middle of this automotive cosmos, tucked modestly between giants, stood a booth with a car that no one had ever heard of, the Pagani Zonda C12. To most visitors, it was curiosity at first sight. The name Pagani meant nothing. The car itself, however, was unforgettable. A wedge of carbon fiber and artistry, the Zonda looked unlike anything on display. Its aerodynamic lines seemed sculpted rather than designed, and its cabin, adorned with jewel-like switches and exposed carbon weave, felt more like an art gallery than a cockpit. Beneath its skin roared the mighty Mercedes-Benz AMG V12, a thunderous heart beating within a feather-light carbon body. Journalists, collectors, and enthusiasts swarmed the booth. Some were awestruck, others were skeptical. How could a brand-new company, founded by an unknown Argentinian engineer, hope to compete in the ruthless world of supercars? Was this car just a showpiece, or could it truly deliver the performance it promised? Pagani, quiet and humble, stood at the center of it all. For him, this was not a show of bravado. It was the culmination of decades of struggle, rejection, and sacrifice. He had poured everything into the Zonda, his money, his reputation, his future, and now all he could do was wait for the world's judgment. Skepticism and doubt. In the weeks after Geneva, the reviews were cautiously optimistic. Some journalists praised the Zonda's extraordinary attention to detail, its carbon fiber construction, and the brilliance of its design. Others dismissed it as a novelty, an ambitious one-man project destined to fade in the shadows of Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Bugatti. Skeptics pointed out the risks. Pagani had no racing pedigree, no decades-long heritage, and no established dealer network. The Zonda was priced astronomically high for an unknown brand. Why would collectors pay Ferrari money or more for a car from a company they had never heard of? For every admirer, there were critics. And critics weren't the only challenge. Pagani faced something far more pressing: money. Financial pressures. Starting a supercar company was brutally expensive. Carbon fiber, still exotic in the late 1990s, cost a fortune to produce and shape. The AMG engines, while a blessing, were not cheap. Pagani's small workshop required skilled craftsmen, each hand-finishing parts that no machine could replicate. Every bolt, every stitch of leather, every carbon panel demanded time and money. But Pagani was committed to his philosophy: no compromise. He would rather delay production than release a car that was anything less than perfect. That philosophy, however, strained the company's finances. Investors were hesitant to pour money into such a risky venture, and banks were wary of lending to a small startup with no proven track record. Horacio was forced to balance precariously between survival and bankruptcy. Every car sold meant the company could live another day, but production was so limited, just a handful of cars per year, that profitability seemed like a distant dream. The Fangio legacy and the weight of expectation. Adding to the pressure was the legacy of Juan Manuel Fangio. Before his passing in 1995, Fangio had agreed to lend his name to Horacio's first car. The project was originally intended to debut as the Fangio F1, a tribute to the racing legend. After his death, Horacio renamed it the Zonda, but Fangio's blessing still lingered over the project. For Pagani, this was both a blessing and a burden. Fangio's name gave the project credibility, but it also created immense expectation. If the Zonda failed, it would not just reflect on Horacio. It would tarnish the name of Argentina's greatest driver. This weight drove Pagani to obsess even more over every detail, every component, every curve of the car. Nothing could be left to chance. Building trust, one customer at a time. In the early years, sales were painfully slow. Convincing someone to buy a Pagani was not easy. Collectors were hesitant to spend millions on an unproven brand. Yet little by little, Horacio won them over. Each customer who stepped into his workshop wasn't treated as a buyer, but as a partner. Pagani would personally walk them through the design, listen to their wishes, and tailor each Zonda to their desires. This bespoke approach became the DNA of Pagani Automobili. While Ferrari and Lamborghini produced hundreds of cars, Pagani focused on a handful, each one unique, each one personalized, each one a masterpiece for a single owner. Slowly, word spread that this wasn't just another supercar brand, it was something far more intimate, far more artistic. External challenges. Even as customers began to trickle in, external challenges threatened the young company. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw increasing regulations on emissions, safety, and homologation, areas where small manufacturers struggled. Meeting these standards required costly testing and certification, stretching Pagani's limited resources even thinner. Then there was the competition. The late 90s and early 2000s marked the rise of the hypercar era. Ferrari unleashed the Enzo, Bugatti prepared the Veyron, and Lamborghini introduced ever more extreme versions of the Diablo and Murcielago. Against these giants, the Zonda seemed fragile, a boutique car from a tiny workshop. Many predicted it would vanish within a few years. The turning point. And yet, Horacio endured. His perseverance was not fueled by market share or profit margins, but by obsession. He worked tirelessly with his team, refining the Zonda, producing evolutions that pushed it further each year. The Zonda S, the Zonda F, the Zonda Cinque, each iteration silenced more critics, drawing admiration from those who once doubted him. But in those fragile early years, before the world fully embraced the Zonda, Horacio Pagani lived on the knife's edge of survival. Every car sold mattered. Every satisfied customer mattered. Every review in the automotive press could mean the difference between collapse and success. He had built a company with no safety net, no fallback plan, and yet, through sheer vision and relentless refusal to compromise, he kept Pagani Automobili alive. The struggles, however, were far from over. To truly establish his brand, Horacio would need more than survival. He would need a breakthrough, a car so extraordinary that it would not just compete with Ferrari or Lamborghini, but eclipse them. That car was coming. It was called the Zonda F. By the mid-2000s, Pagani Automobili was alive, but just barely. The Zonda had turned heads, yes, but to survive in the brutal world of supercars, turning heads wasn't enough. Ferrari had the Enzo, Lamborghini the Murcielago, Bugatti was preparing to unleash the Veyron, and Koenigsegg was rising with its Swedish interpretation of extreme speed. Horacio Pagani knew that his small company needed more than survival. It needed a definitive statement, a car that would not simply compete, but announce to the world, Pagani is here to stay. That statement came in 2005. Its name, the Zonda F, a tribute to Fangio. The F in Zonda F stood for Fangio, Juan Manuel Fangio, the five-time Formula One world champion who had mentored Horacio in his youth. Before his passing, Fangio had encouraged Horacio to move to Italy, to chase his dream. The Zonda F, then, was not just another evolution of the Zonda. It was a tribute, a rolling monument to the man who had believed in him when so few did. With that in mind, the Zonda F was designed to be more than an exotic toy for the wealthy. It was meant to be the car that silenced every critic, a car that could sit shoulder to shoulder with the legends of the industry, and perhaps surpass them. Engineering brilliance. At its heart, the Zonda F carried a Mercedes-AMG 7.3-liter naturally aspirated V12, an engine that had become Pagani's signature. But in the F, it was tuned to produce up to 602 horsepower, depending on the configuration. This wasn't just raw power. Pagani's obsession with lightweight design and carbon fiber mastery made the Zonda F astonishingly agile. Weighing in at just over 1,230 kilograms, it had a power-to-weight ratio that rivaled the fiercest supercars of its time. Performance figures were staggering: 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, a top speed of 214 miles per hour. And yet, these numbers only told half the story. The Zonda F wasn't about stats. It was about sensation. Its soundtrack, an AMG V12 shrieking to redline, was less an exhaust note and more a symphony. Its handling, thanks to a chassis honed like a race car, delivered precision and feedback that left drivers in awe. Inside, the cabin reflected Horacio's philosophy that a car should be as much art as it is engineering. Switchgear milled from aluminum, exposed carbon fiber, and bespoke details made each Zonda F feel like a piece of high jewelry on wheels. No two were exactly alike, each tailored to the desires of its owner. The Nürburgring moment, for all its beauty, what truly cemented the Zonda F's place in history was its performance on one of the most demanding circuits in the world, the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Known as the Green Hell, this 12.9-mile ribbon of asphalt in Germany was the proving ground for the world's fastest cars. In 2007, the Zonda F lapped the Nürburgring in 7 minutes and 27 seconds, a time that shocked the automotive world. This was not a car built by a corporate giant with unlimited resources. This was the creation of a small workshop in Modena, designed by a dreamer from Argentina. Yet it had gone toe-to-toe with, and even outpaced, machines from Ferrari, Porsche, and Lamborghini. That lap time was more than a number. It was validation, a definitive answer to every critic who had once dismissed Pagani as a vanity project. The world takes notice. After the Nürburgring, Pagani Automobili was no longer an obscure boutique builder. Collectors, journalists, and enthusiasts around the world began to speak of Horacio Pagani in the same breath as Enzo Ferrari and Ferruccio Lamborghini. Orders for the Zonda F flowed in, even though production was limited to just 25 units. Scarcity became part of the allure. Owning a Pagani wasn't just about performance. It was about exclusivity, individuality, and a connection to the vision of Horacio himself. While Ferrari built hundreds of Enzos and Lamborghini dozens of Murciélagos, Pagani's cars were vanishingly rare. Each one carried a story, a name, a unique identity. Art meets science. What set Pagani apart most of all was his philosophy, that a car should embody both art and science. This wasn't marketing. It was his life's mantra, inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's belief that engineering and beauty should coexist in harmony. The Zonda F embodied this idea perfectly. It was ferociously fast, meticulously engineered, and at the same time, breathtakingly beautiful. The attention to detail bordered on obsession. Hand-stitched leather, polished aluminum pedals, even the bolts were designed to be visually pleasing. This obsessive craftsmanship earned Pagani something no amount of advertising could buy: respect. Respect from engineers, respect from designers, respect from collectors who had once sworn loyalty only to Ferrari, Bugatti, or Lamborghini. The emotional impact. The Zonda F didn't just win admiration, it won hearts. For many enthusiasts, it symbolized the triumph of the underdog. Here was a man who left Argentina with nothing but determination, who was rejected by Ferrari, who struggled for years to keep his dream alive, and who finally, with the Zonda F, stood among the titans of the automotive world. It was more than a car. It was proof that dreams, no matter how impossible they seem, can become reality with enough passion and perseverance. Limited, but legendary. Production of the Zonda F was capped at 25 units, each one a masterpiece. Some went to collectors who locked them away, others to drivers who took them to tracks and mountain roads, savoring every roar of the V12. Yet the limited run only heightened its legend. The Zonda F became one of the most sought-after hypercars of its era, a car whispered about in collector circles, a car that symbolized the dawn of Pagani as more than just a newcomer. The road ahead. With the Zonda F, Horacio Pagani had not only saved his company but also carved his place in history. He had proven that Pagani Automobili was not a fragile boutique brand, but a genuine force in the hypercar world. But Horacio was not one to rest on success. He knew that to sustain his company, he would need to evolve, to expand, to innovate further. The world now recognized his brilliance, but recognition brought new pressure. Expectations were higher than ever. The Zonda F had opened the door. What came next would define Pagani's future. And Horacio was already looking ahead, sketching designs, dreaming of a successor that would once again raise the bar. That successor would be called the Huayra. By the late 2000s, Pagani Automobili had achieved what many thought impossible. With the Zonda F, Horacio Pagani had silenced the critics, won respect from giants of the industry, and secured his company's place in the rarefied air of hypercar manufacturers. But Horacio knew that standing still was the fastest way to fall behind. The Zonda had given birth to a legend, yes, but it was also a product of its time. Emissions regulations were tightening. Safety standards were becoming stricter. And while Pagani's customers adored the Zonda's raw charisma, the world was changing. To survive in this new landscape, Pagani would need not just an evolution, but a revolution. That revolution arrived in 2011. Its name was the Pagani Huayra, naming the wind. The name Huayra came from Huayra Tata, the Andean god of wind in South American mythology. For Horacio, who never forgot his Argentinian roots, it was a poetic tribute. But it was more than symbolism. Wind itself became the guiding principle of the car's design. The Huayra wasn't just about speed. It was about controlling the air, bending it, shaping it, and using it as a tool for performance. From the first sketch to the final prototype, Horacio envisioned a car that would not only look aerodynamic, but actually live and breathe with the wind. Active aerodynamics. A living machine. At the heart of the Huayra's innovation was something few cars of its time had. Active aerodynamics. The car was fitted with 4 independent flaps, 2 at the front, 2 at the rear, that could rise and fall in real time, controlled by the car's computer system. When cornering, one flap might deploy to increase downforce on a specific wheel, improving grip. Under braking, the rear flaps acted as air brakes, stabilizing the car. On the highway, they could retract to reduce drag, allowing the Huayra to slice through the air effortlessly. It wasn't just engineering, it was artistry. Watching the Huayra's flaps move as it accelerated, braked, and cornered felt almost organic, like a bird adjusting its wings in flight. It gave the impression that the car was alive, a mechanical being that danced with the forces of nature. The beating heart, AMG V12 twin-turbo. Like the Zonda before it, the Huayra's soul was a Mercedes AMG V12, but this time it wasn't naturally aspirated. Instead, Pagani worked closely with AMG to develop a 6.0-liter twin-turbocharged V12 specifically for the Huayra. The result? 720 horsepower and 737 lb-ft of torque, delivered with brutal immediacy. The turbos provided astonishing thrust, propelling the Huayra from 0 to 60 in just 3.0 seconds, with a top speed of over 230 miles per hour. But Horacio was cautious. Turbos, he knew, risked dulling the sound and emotion of an engine, a fatal flaw for a brand built as much on soul as on speed. To combat this, he worked obsessively on the Huayra's exhaust system, ensuring the car's voice remained operatic. The result was a unique soundtrack, less raw than the Zonda, but eerie, powerful, almost otherworldly. A new level of craftsmanship. If the Zonda was Pagani's first statement of art, the Huayra was his masterpiece in design and detail. Every surface, every switch, every curve was refined to perfection. The interior looked like a fusion of science fiction and classical artistry. Gauges gleamed like precision instruments from a luxury watch. Switches were hewn from aluminum blocks, polished and engraved. Leather was hand-stitched, carbon fiber exposed like woven silk. Even the gear lever, a complex exposed mechanism of titanium and aluminum, was designed as a sculpture in its own right. For Horacio, these details were not excess. They were essential. To him, owning a Pagani was like owning a painting or a sculpture. It wasn't just transportation. It was a piece of rolling art. Global recognition. The Huayra's debut stunned the automotive world. Critics who once dismissed Pagani as a niche player now saw him as a true innovator. The Huayra won Top Gear's Hypercar of the Year, and Jeremy Clarkson himself declared it an engineering miracle. For wealthy collectors, the Huayra became an instant must-have. Pagani Automobili's order books filled with names from across the globe, Hollywood celebrities, Middle Eastern royalty, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. For the first time, Pagani's cars weren't just admired in Europe, they were coveted worldwide. But Horacio never lost his sense of humility. Despite the Huayra's fame, Pagani kept production numbers extremely limited. Only 100 units for the original model, each one painstakingly handcrafted. This exclusivity maintained the aura of mystique around the brand, ensuring that every Pagani remained a treasure, not a commodity. The power of storytelling. What made Pagani different was not only the cars, but the story. Customers weren't just buying horsepower or speed, they were buying into Horacio's dream. They were buying a narrative of an immigrant boy from Argentina who defied the odds, who blended Leonardo da Vinci's philosophy of art and science, and who dared to stand against giants. In an age when many supercars felt corporate, Pagani felt personal. Every Huayra that left the factory in Modena carried with it Horacio's fingerprints, his obsession with beauty, and his relentless pursuit of perfection. Variants and special editions. As with the Zonda, the Huayra spawned a series of evolutions and special editions. There was the Huayra BC, named after Horacio's close friend Benny Caiola, Pagani's very first customer. With weight savings, aerodynamic tweaks, and power boosted to nearly 800 horsepower, the BC was a weaponized version of the Huayra, created for track-hungry owners. Later came the Huayra Roadster, a masterpiece of engineering that was even lighter than the coupe, a rarity in the automotive world. And then the Huayra Roadster BC, which pushed performance and exclusivity even further. Each variant kept collectors and enthusiasts hungry for more, while reinforcing Pagani's reputation for turning limited runs into instant legends. A new factory, expanding the dream success, brought growth. In 2017, Pagani inaugurated a new state-of-the-art factory in Modena, designed not as an industrial plant, but as a kind of cathedral for car making. Brick facades, arched windows, and an interior resembling a gallery. It was as if Horacio had built not a factory, but a museum where art happened to come alive. Here, artisans and engineers worked side by side, assembling Pagani cars in a process closer to haute couture than mass production. Every car still took months to complete. Every bolt, every weave of carbon fiber, every stitch of leather was done by hand. This expansion allowed Pagani Automobili to secure its future. It wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving. Recognition among giants. By the late 2010s, Pagani was no longer an underdog. It was a recognized peer of Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Bugatti. Yet, unlike those brands, Pagani remained fiercely independent. Horacio rejected buyout offers from larger corporations, preferring to keep his company small, nimble, and personal. That independence became part of the brand's identity. While others chased volume, Pagani chased perfection. While others sought record sales, Pagani sought lasting legacy. And with the Huayra, Horacio had built not just a car, but a bridge. A bridge between his humble beginnings and his global recognition, between art and science, between dream and reality. But even as the Huayra reigned, Horacio was already looking ahead. The automotive world was evolving, towards electrification, towards hybrid powertrains, towards sustainability. The question on everyone's mind was, how would Pagani adapt? And what would be the next great car to bear his name? The answer would come in the form of yet another masterpiece, perhaps the most audacious Pagani ever. It would be called the Pagani Zonda R, and later, even crazier one-offs and the long-awaited successor to the Huayra. Cars that would cement Pagani not only as an innovator but as a legend in modern culture. By the time the Huayra had established Pagani Automobili as a global icon, Horacio Pagani faced a fascinating dilemma. How do you follow up perfection? The Zonda had become a cult legend, the Huayra a technical marvel. Yet Horacio was never satisfied with simply meeting expectations. He believed in surpassing them, in creating machines that seemed impossible until they were unveiled. It was this philosophy that gave birth to some of the most outrageous, uncompromising, and legendary Paganis ever built. Cars that blurred the line between road machine and artwork, between hypercar and pure insanity. The Zonda refuses to die. To understand Pagani's wildest models, one must first understand the strange afterlife of the Zonda. Officially, production of the Zonda ended in 2011 when the Huayra was introduced. But for collectors and enthusiasts, the Zonda was too special to let go. Demand remained relentless, and Horacio, ever the artisan, could never say no to a passionate customer willing to commission a one-off masterpiece. This gave rise to what fans call the Zonda zombie years. Out of this era came creations like the Zonda 760 series, the Zonda one-offs, and perhaps the craziest of them all, the Zonda R. The Zonda R, the track monster unveiled in 2009, the Pagani Zonda R was not designed for the street. It was a track-only hypercar, a machine unbound by road regulations, created purely to showcase what Horacio and his team could achieve when freed from compromise. Under its carbon fiber skin sat a 6.0-liter naturally aspirated V12, borrowed from the Mercedes CLK GTR race car. It screamed to 750 horsepower and revved past 8,000 RPM, delivering a sound so brutal it was often compared to Formula One cars of the V12 era. The Zonda R was insanely light, just 2,300 pounds, thanks to an obsessive use of carbon fiber and titanium. It could rocket from 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds and reach over 230 miles per hour. But more than numbers, it was about experience. Driving the Zonda R was compared to flying a fighter jet strapped to wheels. The sound, the grip, the violence of acceleration. It was a sensory overload. The car's active aerodynamics and racing suspension allowed it to corner with surreal precision. The Zonda R wasn't just fast, it was record-breaking. At the Nürburgring, it set a lap time of 6 minutes 47 seconds, a world record at the time, beating even purpose-built race cars. For a boutique manufacturer like Pagani, it was a declaration to the giants. We can play at the very top. One-off Zondas, dreams made real. The Zonda's myth only grew as customers requested unique builds. Horacio obliged with creations like the Zonda 760 LH, commissioned for Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton. Painted in Hamilton's chosen purple, it became one of the most famous Zondas ever made. Then came the Zonda 760 RS, the Zonda Fantasma, and the Zonda HP Barchetta, a tribute car to Horacio Pagani himself. The Barchetta, unveiled in 2017, featured a shortened windshield, exposed rear wheels, and an old-school open-top design. Only 3 were built, each valued at tens of millions of dollars. What was astonishing was not just the performance of these machines, but the fact that each was a work of bespoke artistry. No 2 Zondas were alike. Every one-off carried a story, a soul, and a direct connection to Horacio's workshop in Modena. The Huayra evolves, BC, Roadster, and Imola. While the Zonda refused to fade, the Huayra began its own transformation into legend. In 2016, Pagani introduced the Huayra BC. Named after Benny Caiola, the first man ever to buy a Pagani, it was lighter, sharper, and more extreme than the standard Huayra. With over 750 horsepower, a new aerodynamic package, and obsessive weight saving, the BC was a celebration of speed and friendship. Then came the Huayra Roadster in 2017. Unlike most convertibles, which add weight for structural rigidity, the Roadster was lighter than the coupe, a feat of engineering that shocked the industry. Only 100 units were made, each a showcase of Pagani's mastery of carbon titanium composite. But Horacio wasn't finished. The Huayra Imola, unveiled in 2020, pushed boundaries further. Named after the legendary Italian racetrack, it produced a jaw-dropping 827 horsepower and featured the most advanced aerodynamic package ever fitted to a Pagani. The car looked like a storm-given form, with wild wings, scoops, and diffusers. Only 5 were built, each costing over $5 million. The Codalunga, a work of rolling sculpture. In 2022, Pagani unveiled something unlike anything before, the Huayra Codalunga. Codalunga means long tail in Italian, and the car was inspired by 1960s endurance racers like the Ferrari 250 LM and Porsche 917. With its extended flowing rear end, the Codalunga looked less like a modern hypercar and more like a sculpture in motion. Only 5 units were built, each tailored to its owner's vision. It was proof of Horacio's philosophy that a car could be timeless art, rooted in history yet futuristic in execution. Cultural impact, the Pagani phenomenon. By the 2020s, Pagani had become more than a car company, it was a cultural phenomenon. In the world of video games like Gran Turismo and Forza Horizon, Paganis became digital dream machines for millions of young enthusiasts. On social media, spotting a Huayra or Zonda was an event, generating viral moments worldwide. In music videos, rap lyrics, and Hollywood films, Pagani became shorthand for ultimate exclusivity. To own one wasn't just to own a car. It was to announce to the world that you had achieved the unachievable. But beyond the hype, true enthusiasts saw something deeper. Pagani wasn't about mass-market celebrity. It was about individuality. While Ferrari and Lamborghini produced hundreds or even thousands of cars a year, Pagani made only dozens. Each car was still assembled by hand by artisans in Modena under Horacio's watchful eye. In an industry obsessed with speed records and technology, Pagani represented something rare, a human touch, a reminder that cars could still be emotional, soulful creations. The Pagani Utopia. The next chapter. In 2022, Horacio revealed the long-awaited successor to the Huayra, the Pagani Utopia. Its name reflected Horacio's vision of a perfect future. At a time when most manufacturers were moving to hybrid and electric power, Pagani stayed true to its roots with a twin-turbo V12, developed once again with AMG, producing over 850 horsepower. But the most remarkable detail, the Utopia came with an option for a manual transmission. In a world dominated by dual-clutch automatics, Horacio listened to his customers who begged for the purity of a manual gearbox. He delivered, proving once again that Pagani was different, unafraid to defy trends in pursuit of driving joy. The Utopia combined classic beauty with modern performance, blending nostalgia with innovation. It was more than a successor, it was a statement. Pagani's future would remain deeply personal, deeply human. The legend lives on. From the Zonda R's earth-shattering scream to the Huayra Codalunga's sculpted elegance, Pagani has created cars that feel less like machines and more like myths. They exist at the intersection of art, engineering, and dream. For collectors, owning a Pagani is the pinnacle. For enthusiasts, hearing one is unforgettable. For the world, Pagani has become proof that even in an age of mass production and digital homogeny, there is still room for the artisan, the dreamer, the visionary. And it all comes back to Horacio Pagani, the boy from Argentina who refused to give up on his obsession, who crossed oceans with nothing but sketches, and who built a company that turned imagination into reality. These legendary cars are not just vehicles. They are symbols of passion, of courage, and of the eternal dance between art and science. And with every new creation, Pagani's legacy only grows stronger. In the realm of automotive history, few names shine with the brilliance of Pagani. Yet unlike century-old giants like Ferrari, Porsche, or Mercedes-Benz, Pagani Automobili is young, a company born not from corporate ambition but from a singular dream. And that is perhaps what makes its story so extraordinary. Because at the heart of this legend is not just a factory in Modena or a series of hypercars worth millions of dollars. At the center of it all is a man, Horacio Pagani, and his unwavering belief that cars could be more than machines. They could be poetry on wheels. From Argentina to Italy, the impossible journey. Think back to where this story began. A young boy in Argentina, sketching futuristic cars by candlelight. A teenager building his own bicycles and go-karts from scrap. An outsider writing letters to giants like Enzo Ferrari only to be dismissed. And then, a one-way ticket to Italy, with little more than determination in his pocket. Horacio's journey mirrors that of countless dreamers. But where others surrendered to circumstance, he refused to yield. He found a place at Lamborghini, fought his way into the world of carbon fiber, and eventually, when the doors closed around him, he built his own. Pagani Automobili was not born in luxury or security. It was forged in risk, sacrifice, and relentless faith in art and engineering. That is why every Pagani car carries more than horsepower and beauty. They carry Horacio's soul. The cars as works of art. When you look at a Pagani, the sweeping lines of the Zonda, the fluid surfaces of the Huayra, the sculpted purity of the Utopia, you are not just seeing a car. You are seeing a canvas. You are seeing the hand of an artist who treats metal, leather, and carbon fiber like paint and brush. Every switch, every stitch, every bolt in a Pagani is deliberate. The titanium screws are etched with the Pagani logo, not because they need to be, but because Horacio believes beauty lies in the smallest details. It's why owners speak not of buying a Pagani, but of commissioning one, the way a patron might commission a sculpture or a painting. In a world where supercars often chase numbers, top speeds, lap times, acceleration figures, Pagani chases something else, emotion. That's why the Zonda R's scream still echoes in enthusiasts' minds. Why the Huayra's active flaps seem almost alive, responding to the driver's every move. Why the Utopia's manual gearbox feels like a rebellion in the age of automation. A legacy of defiance. If there is one thread that binds Horacio's journey, it is defiance. Defiance against those who told him he could never succeed. Defiance against the industry trends that demanded conformity. Defiance against time itself, as the Zonda refused to die, living on in endless one-offs. When other manufacturers abandoned naturally aspirated engines, Pagani kept the soul alive with Mercedes-AMG V12s. When others moved toward hybrids and electrics, Horacio doubled down on the visceral experience of combustion, yet always in dialogue with his customers, always listening. In doing so, Pagani carved out a unique place in history, not as the biggest, not as the fastest, but as the most personal, the human element. And perhaps this is what makes Pagani's story so powerful. It reminds us that even in a world dominated by corporations and mass production, there is still room for the artisan. Still room for the craftsman who touches every detail, who knows his customers by name, who treats cars not as products, but as lifelong companions. Horacio often says he does not build cars for the masses. He builds them for the one person who will treasure them. In a way, this philosophy is old-fashioned, even romantic. Yet it is also revolutionary, because in staying true to his vision, he has created a brand more desirable than companies 100 times larger. Pagani's cultural footprint. From Lewis Hamilton's purple Zonda 760LH to the countless times Paganis have appeared in video games, music videos, and films, the brand has become more than an automaker. It has become a cultural symbol. In hip-hop lyrics, Pagani sits alongside Bugatti and Ferrari as shorthand for success. In video games, young players choose Paganis as their dream cars, even if they never see one in real life. In collector circles, owning a Pagani is not just about wealth. It is about joining a story, about possessing a piece of rolling history. This cultural resonance ensures that Pagani will never be forgotten, even by those who may never hear the thunder of a V12 in person. The eternal legacy. So what is Horacio Pagani's true legacy? It is not only the Zonda or the Huayra or even the Utopia. His true legacy is the belief that dreams matter, that no matter where you are born, no matter how impossible the odds, passion and persistence can create miracles. Pagani Automobili is proof that artistry and technology can coexist, that cars can be both brutally fast and heartbreakingly beautiful, that even in the 21st century there is room for wonder. A cinematic ending. And so, as we close this story, imagine one final image. A Pagani Zonda R thunders down a track, its V12 screaming into the horizon. A Huayra Codalunga glides through Italian countryside roads, its long tail catching the golden light. A Utopia sits in a quiet Modena workshop, waiting for its owner, polished to perfection by artisans who see themselves not as workers, but as sculptors. At the center of it all stands Horacio Pagani. Quiet, meticulous, his hands still sketching, his eyes still chasing the perfect line. He is no longer the boy from Argentina, dismissed as a dreamer. He is the man who proved that dreams, when pursued with enough courage, can reshape reality. In the end, the story of Pagani is more than the story of cars. It is the story of art, of passion, of humanity itself. And as long as there are roads, as long as there are dreamers, the name Pagani will echo, not just in the roar of its engines, but in the hearts of all who dare to believe.